You can't spit on LinkedIn without hitting at least 10 coaches. But how many of them actually know what they're doing? The best way to learn is to observe them in the wild, noting their presence, scrutinizing their questioning skills, detecting their ability to unearth insights and share them generously, without attachment, seeing how well they listen. That's a big one. I had the opportunity to observe and witness a truly masterful coach on the latest episode of the DesuckifyWork Podcast. Dan Kent embodies all of the qualities mentioned above and does so with grace, curiosity, and vulnerability. Dan's one of the good ones. Try not to spit on him, please. During our conversation, we dug into the heart of what makes great coaching so useful. And despite what your feed might be telling you, it's not about crushing your goals or 10xing anything. It's about self-awareness and humility, especially for leaders, being open to feedback and creating the space for that to happen freely and safely. It may get a bit uncomfortable at times, but that's a whole lot better than your team being uncomfortable all of the time. It's about objectivity. A great coach brings an unbiased, detached perspective that we rarely experience in our day-to-day lives, so we can zoom out from our bubble and see where we might need to shift our thinking and behavior. And it's about seeking the truth beneath the tumult, embracing your inner kindergartner and asking why until real understanding emerges. If you want to understand what amazing coaching looks like, listen to Dan. Here he is. Okay, Dan Kent, welcome to the DesuckifyWork Podcast.
Thanks, TJ. I've been looking so forward to this. We always have great conversations, and I'm sure today will be no different.
Yeah, no, I know you were generous enough to have me on your show not too long ago, and I'm hoping we can build on some of the momentum and energy we had there. And
likewise.
Before we go too deep, I want to just give people who may not have listened to that or don't know who you are just a chance to get to know what do you do for work and how did you come to be doing it?
Great. Let's keep this as concise as possible. So I'm a business coach, owner and founder of Best Self Coaching. Been doing that for about almost 15 years now, which is kind of crazy. I work primarily with business owners, entrepreneurs who are kind of out of their depth, and those folks who have gotten into this thing called business ownership, and they were good at what they at maybe the craft, but all of those fundamentals that are required of business owners to be confident and competent and capable, whether that's finance or management or marketing or any of those other disciplines of business owners really need to know. I mean, we just kind of, walked into this tornado not realizing everything that was going to be required of us. So that tends to be my ideal client, my avatar in the marketing world and the business owners that I tend to help the most with. Recently, I've gotten into some high level executive coaching, which I just absolutely love. It's working with kind of a different population of folks, those who are, executive level, maybe looking to make a lateral move to another organization, maybe internally make a lateral move. Maybe they're trying to level up, from director to VP or VP to president or something.
Yeah.
And the learning curve for those folks is vastly different from the former type of client that I tend to work with. And I find that interesting. And I have sat in the C-suite and been at that table, and I know all of the dynamics that are at play, so I can hopefully contribute a fair amount to those people too. I also have a podcast, as you referenced earlier. It's called the Clearing Obstacles Podcast. Got 2 seasons under our belt.
Nice.
Not a ton. So all in all, I think it's 25, 26 episodes between the 2 seasons. Relatively short seasons. I like them to be themed.
Okay.
And, be on the lookout for season 3 in 2025. For the time being, I'm kind of sunsetting that for a second while I focus on some other stuff.
Cool. Well, Dan, I love how you describe some of the things you do and the distinctions between those, specifically those 2 populations, right? The sort of entrepreneurial business owner who is driven to do a thing, to build a thing, but may not quite know how, have all those sort of technical skills and leadership skills may not be there. And then on the other side, you have the executives who have probably had a chance to at least start to develop some of those leadership skills, but they probably need some refinement a little bit. And what I've noticed is a lot of organizations are not investing enough in the training, so that where coaching can come in is help people kind of fast forward through some of that stuff on their own timeline,
right?
Versus maybe having to sit through some amount of quote unquote training and realize that there's actually a lot of information inside that just needs to be kind of unearthed,
So well put. I couldn't agree more. I think a lot of business owners in particular, let's just say leaders in general, come to the table with at least a broad understanding of everything that's going to be involved in leadership. They've hopefully they've had some mentors. They've been led in thoughtful and compassionate ways and effective ways. And, hopefully they're bringing to bear those experiences and the ones that were not so savory, bringing those lessons learned in the kinds of leadership they do or don't want to exemplify. So that, I think everybody comes to the table at least intuitively with some idea of what it should look like, but actually letting that emerge from you is a whole different ballgame because, sometimes it's technical skills, sometimes it's humility, sometimes it's the opposite, it's confidence. And, getting somebody who is trained as a coach, consultant, leadership advisor, anything in that discipline is so vital because they're able to either bring you up to speed on some of the technical aspects of that, or help unearth some of those things that really are intrinsic to that emerging leader, but they don't see it for themselves because maybe they lack self-awareness or nobody's ever really helped them bring that out.
I think that's very common. I think a lot of us, as we move up leadership ranks, whether it's quote unquote sort of put upon us or we put it upon ourselves, probably some combination, there is a little bit of and this might be kind of a somewhat uniquely American belief of like the go it alone, the renegade, the I can do it all by myself, I don't need help kind of mindset. And it actually asking for help can feel like a sign of weakness. And therefore, you do enough to get yourself kind of moving up the ranks, but you may show up at that, whether it's a C-suite or a VP or even director level, wherever you sort of, at some point you wake up and you go, and that's that person who, like you mentioned, is like a little bit feeling like I'm a little over my head. And that dynamic of humility and confidence is also interesting because I actually find, and I've noticed this even in myself, sometimes I'm lacking confidence where maybe I should have it. I'm being kind of humble about something, but I actually know more than I think. And then on the other end, I realize like, I don't know nearly what I thought I knew about that other thing, and maybe a little more humility. So the awareness to recognize those distinctions and to realize like the story we've been telling ourselves for however many years, it's not the truth. And we need to dig deeper to see like what lies underneath our stories that have carried us along,
Yeah. So well put. Those stories that we have concocted, and we all have them, they may serve us, they may not. Those stories we've concocted about our experience or our abilities in leadership or anything else, frankly, they have been sort of formed by, of course, the experiences, but also by the people in our lives and the feedback that we've gotten. And again, those may have not been objectively shared with us. They may have had an agenda. They may have been dysfunctional in an organization that you were in. And again, just by, you're kind of begging the question, just by virtue of who you got that guidance from, are they a reliable source for a story in that chapter or a chapter in that story that you're telling yourself?
Yeah. I think if we're being honest, there's always some filters that people are applying when they communicate with us. I think that's just human nature.
Sure.
And it's up to us to kind of put it through our own filter and the truth filter and see what's really there. And that's not easy. At least I know in my experience, I've been doing a lot more of that work since I moved into coaching. And it can be tough sometimes. Some of your stories, like you love those stories. They are your identity.
Oh man,
You
I'll
know,
kill and die for them to
yeah,
preserve them sometimes. Yeah, for better
yeah,
or worse.
right. And it can block us from what's possible for ourselves, right?
Yeah, couldn't agree more. And I would even punctuate that at every level. I don't
Yeah.
know of any, even well, there's no real dramatic irony to this. Those leaders that I've encountered who are the best at it
Hmm.
um, are perpetually on the path to improve, to get feedback, to run it through a clean filter, if you will,
Yeah.
to use your analogy.
Hmm.
And that ain't no coincidence.
No, I can imagine. So for you, I'm curious. Um, this is the Desuckify Work show, after all.
After all,
What what role does work play in your life?
oh gosh, it's, I mean, it's the vast bulk of what I do in
Hmm.
any given week. So
Yeah.
by virtue of quantity,
Hmm.
it's pretty impactful. I mean, you
Yeah.
could say that for most folks too, but 40, 50 hours, give or take. Taking on a special project recently. It's being ramped up significantly
Yeah.
temporarily while I get through
Hmm.
the learning curve.
Yeah.
But yeah, it affects the quality of my life. I'd, all that said, it's probably third.
Yeah.
And this is the caveat. My relationship to myself is number one. My
Hmm.
relationship with others is number two. And my relationship to my work is probably number three when it comes to impact. Because
Mm.
if I'm steady in my own relationship to myself, even numbers two and three can be compromised or in a bumpy patch or
Hmm.
a little bit strained at any moment. And as long as I can preserve my equanimity, I can be clear in my own relationship to myself. Um, I can get through wherever those bumps seem to be taking me.
Hmm. Makes me wonder a little bit, like, because I like how you frame that, and I can sit there and go, maybe that's true for me, but for you, I'm curious how how do you maintain that equanimity for yourself, your relationship to yourself? What helps you maintain that? Because I can imagine if you maintain that, it certainly gives you a better shot of number two and number three
Right? Yeah.
following suit. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. I like a certain amount of structure
Uh-huh.
to the way I live my life
Yeah.
that I have all kinds of rituals that are involved in that structure.
Hmm.
Some morning reading, some meditation. Um, that morning reading kind of involves like some affirmations and clarifications of bigger purpose and values and
Uh-huh.
uh, core character things that are important to me.
Yeah.
Meditation is huge for me. I don't mean to evangelize about it, but the deeper you get into it, I think the deeper the impact.
Hmm.
And I've probably meditated for God 30 years ish, maybe more,
Wow.
off and on. And
Hmm.
I found, especially in the past year, a really mm, consistent discipline. I'm not crazy about that word when it refers to meditation, but a consistent engagement with those kinds of tools.
Yeah.
It's exponential, the value that it brings me. It
Hmm.
lets me keep a certain equanimity in my life that
Hmm.
and perspective in my life with gratitude, with um, you can get a little esoteric in the nature of consciousness in
Hmm.
meditation and
Yeah.
having those tools available to me and using them regularly
Hmm.
um, is profound. I was just talking with a client today, just yesterday, about meditation, and
Hmm.
he's just gotten off the train recently with it, and
Yeah.
and maybe in the past year, and he's like, God, why am I not doing that anymore? It was so profound for me. I was like, and that's the thing. You could get up from your office right now, go take a 20-minute walk out in the woods, or
Hmm.
down some side street or whatever. Go outside, take a walk, and that's going to feel good, of
Hmm.
course. But if you 7 days a week go take that same 20-minute walk, that the cumulative benefits of that are
Yeah.
far outpace what you're getting in that one-off.
Yeah.
So yes, there's always value to a single one-off meditation session, right? Just go
Hmm.
breathe,
Yeah.
regain your composure, regulate your nervous system, and that's great. but that's just level one.
Yeah.
And taking it beyond that, really, I've just so come to appreciate that as fundamental to my
Mm.
maintaining that equanimity, maintaining that relationship to myself. And, the ROI on that, we calculated it actually on that call. He'll know who he is if he's listening.
Okay.
We have 1,440 minutes available to us every day. 1440. It's kind of this magic number
Yeah.
amongst productivity nerds, especially.
Mm-hmm.
1440. If you take 10 minutes of every day to ground yourself, to identify your priorities, to whatever, that 10-minute investment occupies less than 0.7% of your total available minutes during the day. The ROI you're going to get on a 0.7% investment of your entire day, that return on investment is, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. It begs the question though, right? Because your client you were talking with, they got off the train, right?
Yeah.
And they even asked, why am I not doing that? And this is so common. I've meditated in different ways over the last 10 years, and I would say I'm infrequent right now.
Yeah.
And I've never not found benefit from it. At times it's frustrating. There's times where you meditate and you're like, oh, was I doing it right, quote unquote? But usually at a bare minimum, it's like my body appreciates the 20 minutes of settling.
At a bare minimum.
And then sometimes something even cooler happens.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, like you said, when you habitualize that, it's even better. Like you start to feel like you're carrying it with you. But something in I don't know what it is, but some kind of level setting that happens in our minds that says, I'm not better now. Like somehow it just becomes our default state again, which it's leveled up, but we lose that gap goes away in our mind. And it's just, this is how I am now. So I don't need, if an appointment comes up or, some other thing that could take my time away.
Yep.
My brain is no longer remembering that the meditation is there. Like, so do you actually have to actively remind yourself of those benefits? Is there some process, like, some people do journaling and stuff? Is there some way that you help connect yourself back to the things that are really helping you throughout the day?
Yeah, great question. Because you're right, we adapt to the new normal, in all kinds of ways. From that academic term, hedonic adaptation is, God, I can't wait till I'm making six figures. Well, you're making six figures, and I can't wait till I'm making $250,000 a year. And we do the same thing, I think, when it comes to our own mental, emotional, spiritual, social health. We sort of under-index for what got us there. And forget that was a fundamental part of what we do. So to your question, what's that like? From my experiences, when I was trying to get back on that train consistently, I had to calendar it. Like I had to put it into my calendar that I was going to give myself a 15-minute break around lunchtime and take either a nap or meditation, or if lunchtime period wasn't working, I've got a client call that day during the lunch hour, then I move it. It's just playing Tetris with my calendar. Then it goes to morning. It goes to morning before I set off on my day. So I had to calendar it at first. It's now actually because of the benefits that I'm truly feeling in so many ways from it. It's kind of becoming a go-to. It's sometimes a coping mechanism, or I'm like, I'm just feeling like I can tell I need a thing, and I'll pull that tool out of the toolkit and say, I'm just going to put my phone in do not disturb for 10 minutes, and I'm going to go have a seat and breathe, and maybe put on a meditation app or not, and engage with it. But it started out, yes, I needed to ritualize it. It had to have a spot in my calendar, and once it became a habit, again, it just becomes a go-to mechanism where I really almost don't have to think about it. I just know I need to sit for a minute. Yeah.
It sounds like almost the habitualizing of it sort of burned it into your brain. Like
it really did.
This is a thing for me.
Yeah.
Okay. So you described what you do, and you talk about that you're a coach, business coach, and you're doing some executive coaching. And that's sort of the same world I exist in. And one thing I've noticed is there's a lot of coaches in the world, more and more each day. And I think there's a lot of confusion about what coaching even really is. And there's different forms, and I get that. But broadly speaking, I think there might be some stuff that holds it together. Why should somebody hire a coach?
Great question. And I'm glad we have this little format here to share ideas about that because, and we've talked about this before, you're not going to be able to convey the value of coaching in a 30-second social media reel. You're not going to be able to convey it in 140 characters or less on your favorite social media channel. Like it has to be experienced. And frankly, that's why I did season 1 of the Clearing Obstacles podcast. Those are actual hour-long coaching sessions with some very courageous folks who decided to get on there and open their kimono, as it were. And it's experiential. And when you're engaged with a coach at any level, let's just take the generic example folks would be familiar with, like a sporting event of some kind. A coach they're on the sideline, they're watching, bringing to bear their experience in the discipline, an awareness of others, an awareness of how you're showing up on the field or on the court. They have this objective perspective that you do not possess because you're in the game. You're too close, right? You can't see it. It's right there. And a coach brings a good coach, by the way, because there are plenty of wannabe folks out there that think they could slap their name up and don't have the chops to really do it. But a good coach brings to bear experience and is able to communicate. This is also important, what they're observing, how it relates to you, and now what you might consider doing about it. So they also come equipped with a great toolkit to be able to give you actionable work to do based on what they're observing. So again, a basketball coach is going to be like, look, you forgot your fundamentals, the pass and shooting, like you're missing these fundamentals, and be able to give that player the exercises that they need to level up on their 3-point game or whatever. In business coaching, executive coaching, life coaching, they will be skilled enough to prescribe, here's what I'm observing and here's what I think you need to do about it. And that perspective is something that, again, I don't care how good you are. You're not going to be able to have that objectivity that a coach brings. And again, no coincidence that the greatest players, athletes, executives, professionals, I don't know what the percentage is these days. I used to have those numbers at my fingertips, but they all have at least one coach, if not multiple.
Many have multiple, right? So
what do you think? Why should somebody get a coach?
I love how you described the outside perspective and the I always use the word detached, which can sound a little strange to people, but it's like, I'm not attached to the outcome per se, meaning I'm not rooting for you to become the CEO. I'm rooting for you to become who you ultimately decide you want to be. I'm rooting for you to grow in the way that works for you. But that through the coaching process could evolve, could move, could shift. But ultimately, I'm not invested in the same way that I think our friends and our family, because some people might be like, I've got friends to talk to and that's great. And that's its own dynamic. And that's obviously critical. But it's not the same thing. A friend is going to be invested in a way that a coach can kind of sit back and have a little bit of a separation there and go, okay, I want for you to grow. And I have no skin in the game on terms of where that goes. And I can support you differently because of that than if I was a friend or a family member, et cetera. So I always think that's an interesting thing. And I think self-awareness, as you described it, you're right here. It's all right here. And yourself, not seeing yourself truly, it's really helpful to have that outside perspective to reflect back what somebody else is noticing. And then you can internalize that and decide what to do with it. And I think that can be really helpful because you just don't know yourself sometimes until you have a chance to have a mirror kind of allow you to really look at yourself.
And from that context, just to augment what you're saying, I 100% agreement with you. And it
Hmm.
doesn't diminish the value of the feedback or input I get from my wife, doesn't diminish the value
Yeah,
of the
not
feedback
at
I get
all.
from a colleague or
Hmm.
a peer.
Yeah.
Doesn't diminish it. I want that information too. Like
Hmm.
I want to know how they see me and what they're observing.
Yeah.
But having somebody specifically there, as you're describing, that has enough objective emotional distance
Hmm.
and um, can bring that to the conversation
Yeah.
is entirely different than what you're
Hmm.
going to get from somebody you have an established relationship with.
Yeah. So what's your approach as a coach? Why should somebody hire Dan as a coach?
um, you see in my LinkedIn profile, my email signature. I was described one time by one of my clients. You're like a loving butt kicker, and
I love that phrase.
that rang true with me. I just dig it.
Yeah.
I proudly said I'm going to make a patch and put it on the back of my jean jacket.
Hmm.
I like it because leadership sometimes requires a firm hand. Again, think of the coach in the traditional sense. Like
Hmm.
they're not going to hesitate to bench you if you get out
Hmm.
of line.
Yeah.
They're going to kick your butt and hold you accountable to certain standards. You miss a practice, you're benched. I'm sorry. Um,
Hmm.
and I'm doing this because I love you and I love our team and I love our bigger purpose. And I'm the one looking out for this.
Right.
And I take it very personally, my role in a coaching
Hmm.
relationship.
Yeah.
I didn't always. I kind of early on as a new coach, I would occasionally, sorry, former clients, I occasionally would sort of phone it in. And
Mm.
I'm mortified that I
Yeah.
that I did that early on. Like just makes me feel terrible.
Yeah.
Like I haven't phoned in a coaching conversation in years because
Hmm.
I take it too seriously. Aside from,
Hmm.
they're investing their time and their money and their heart into these conversations, I
Yeah.
have a job to do.
Hmm.
And I do. I take it with a lot of gravity. There's a
Mm.
lot of importance. The I was describing it to somebody not too long ago that as leaders or business owners, we have a tremendous impact that we make on the world. If we have employees, their livelihoods, their families, and their well-being,
Mhm.
it's all relying on us.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of power in the role that comes with that.
Yeah.
And not to overemphasize with any degree of self-importance, but just as the structure of coaching goes, I get to work with 10 to 20 clients at a time who uh, my impact is that
Yeah.
significant, right?
Yeah.
I'm coaching them, and I realize that they've got anywhere from 300 to 300 employees whose livelihoods are depending upon them showing up in the best possible way. And
Mm.
so, like I said, not to overinflate the importance of who I am or what I do, but I just think the function of a good coach takes it that damn seriously.
Yeah. Well, it's a great bit of awareness, right? To recognize that there is weight there, and I think it's an awareness that any leader, when they get to a place where they really understand what they're truly doing, sees.
Yeah,
And then as a coach, you're pulling like a lever behind that, even, right? Because
yeah,
those levers affect a leader who then affects that, and you've got multiple leaders that you're talking to.
yeah,
What helped you? You said in the early years you weren't fully connected to that. What
yeah.
helped you get connected to the weight of that?
These gray hairs that you see, the hairline that's friggin' gone. Um, the years of doing it, of
Yeah.
just seeing when you know, it's painful, like I said, to revisit those moments where I'm fully aware that I
Hmm.
underserved folks in whatever
Yeah.
capacity, and I wasn't like crap in the bed sideways and all other ways, but like
Hmm.
I, it, you feel it, you get it,
Yeah.
and hopefully with age comes wisdom if you're paying attention.
Yeah.
And I think just by virtue of the years of doing this, it sinks in more every day.
Yeah.
And I'm deeply humbled and very grateful and very appreciative of the opportunities that I've had with my clients over the years. because of that, because I know especially if they're investing themselves in it, they're not phoning it in either. We've seen some pretty impactful stuff happen over the past, 15 years I've been doing this.
What you talk about working with a lot of leaders and business owners. What is the most surprising thing that a lot of them have in common?
The good ones?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we could do the good and maybe the ones who are struggling if there's an answer there too.
That's a great question, because there is, in my experience, there is a difference. Those that are doing it well, they are balancing so many different attributes. You and I both know Meredith Bell from Grow Strong Leaders, that organization, and her partner Denny Coates wrote this book, Grow Strong Character. Terrific book. Yeah. And there are 37 different character traits. You're hungry for the development of your character. And again, see that book if you need some tidbits on where those are.
Yeah.
You're hungry for the development of your character. You're humble enough to not take it all too seriously, but with an appropriate amount. But probably one of the main attributes is really deep self-awareness, or pursuit, at the very least, a pursuit of self-awareness. And the good ones are always working to keep their finger on the pulse of their own self-awareness.
What about the ones who are struggling? Anything you notice there?
They don't. and that sounds like a really flippant sort of comment, but
no, I get it.
They don't. But because under that umbrella of self-awareness are all of those, mortal sins that, hubris, or lack of empathy, or underconfidence, overconfidence will under index for a lot of those character traits. And the ones that don't get the feedback they need, again, I mean, they don't have a coach. Okay, maybe you can't afford it. Maybe it's not working for you right now. Yeah. But my God, listen to somebody, whether it's a spouse or a friend or clergy or your psychiatrist or whatever. Get that feedback. The ones that struggle aren't open. They're not available to that. And they struggle.
I wonder if that also comes back a little bit to the identity, right? We built an identity of who we are, who we maybe now are as a leader, who I am as a business person. And there's a certain amount, it's fragile. And maybe we know it's fragile sometimes. We know we've put some stories in place just to allow us to get through the day, the week, the year. And if we invite feedback, we're kind of, on some level, we know. Like if that's, if it's a table and it's got 4 legs, sooner or later, at least one of those legs is going to get just flicked off, right? And at the very least, it's going to be like, we're going to be struggling a little bit, and we're going to need to figure out what goes in its place, how do I build that again? And that's terrifying, right? I mean, because I think we believe if that gets exposed, that we will lose our ability to be a leader. People won't trust us anymore. And what's, I think, perhaps interesting, I'm curious about your perspective here. Most of the other people actually already know this. So in many ways, we're fooling ourselves, right? So what can help, if anything, somebody who is really fearful of the feedback potentially knocking their identity and blowing it up a bit? What can you do as a coach to help them at least get curious about it, before they even fully step into it?
Yeah, dude, I love the way you said that. Like, the irony is it's probably not a secret to everybody else. Yeah. So whatever you're afraid of them discovering you're a fraud, you don't, you're bluffing sometimes, like, they already know. And if they don't know exactly what it is, they feel something's off. Yeah. They do. And especially if you've got the right people in your organization, that's that's episode 2 for you and me, I suppose. If you've got the right people in your organization, they're going to appreciate the humility, the vulnerability, the courage that it takes to own that shit.
Yeah.
And say, team, I've been made aware that I have this thing going on with me where I bluster a little bit much, or maybe I don't listen to people. I talk over people. It's been brought to my attention. I just want you to know I'm working on it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm indexing for that. I'm calibrating the way I'm showing up these days, and I'm going to ask for your help. Maybe point it out, compassionately. Know that I'm working on this.
Yeah.
But just so you guys know, I know, and I'm working on it.
Mm.
Anybody on the team that wouldn't appreciate that, I wouldn't want them on my team anymore anyway.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's something very, to use your word earlier, humble about that, but it's also just very, it's just so truthful, like plain truth, right?
Capital
like
T.
You're not trying to shelter that information in any way. It's like, I heard it. I get it.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm struggling with it a little bit. Maybe I'm struggling to fully grasp it all, but I am working on it. And I'm, maybe here's some of the things I'm doing to work on it. And part of that includes getting your gentle and kind feedback. There's something so disarming. And this is maybe tells us something about our culture at work in particular, and the way we expect leaders to speak, that to simply show up and say something so plain and unvarnished as, I've got an issue and I'm working on it, and I would love your support. Like that, I think a lot of people would be shocked by that coming from a leader. And yet, it's the most basic, fundamental human thing we could ever say. Like what's going on there?
Yeah, 100%. It's ironic. And look, that sometimes, that's flying before you can run, before you can walk. And it might be baby steps. Maybe you've got a couple trusted people in your organization, or maybe you even start back a level from that, and they're not even in your organization.
Yeah.
And you share that with them and just say, can you call me on this when you see me doing it? Because I'm starting to have this awareness of my tendency to talk over others, or my tendency to bluster, or my tendency to feel like an imposter or whatever, to just maybe share, tighten that circle a little bit.
Yeah.
Share it and maybe close that ring up a little bit to people that you can trust and feel safe enough. You're not completely stepping out into overexposing, but
I like that. I think that idea of it's a form of exposure therapy, right? It's like giving ourselves a small dose of something, in a relatively low stakes environment. I think that can always be such good, helpful coaching guidance for somebody to embrace whatever it is they're working on. Find a way to experience whatever you need to experience, whether it's more feedback, whatever it is, in whatever way you're going to feel safe in first. And then, okay, now open the circle.
I didn't die.
Bit. Yeah. You're still here. You're still in your job. People don't look at you funny now because you've exposed this so-called weakness. I think that can be really a helpful way to do it, rather than the full rip the Band-Aid off. There are times when you do need to rip the Band-Aid off, but I think a lot of things we can expose ourselves to gently.
I agree. And an argument for coaching, since you asked earlier about that, and a great place to try that out, a test run, a dress rehearsal, is with a coach. Okay, I'm going to talk to my team this Friday, and I think I'm finally going to acknowledge to them this thing that they probably already know. So I'm going to try this out on you. And we run a dress rehearsal. All right, let me have it. Let me hear it. And it's a great opportunity to sort of sharpen the edges there, to be like, or soften the edges if you need to do that. So that they have a chance to, that leader who's emerging, as we all are, has a chance to just try it on. And just like with anything, you practice it 3, 5, 50 times. By the time you go live, you're good.
It's already there. It's in you.
It's real. It's not contrived. It's not fabricated. You're not posturing. You just, like you said, it's the capital T truth. And you're just letting it out there. Like you said before.
Yeah.
Dude,
So
are you the last one to know? Because we've been on watching this for
we kind of
watching this for
we
years.
may have noticed this. Yeah.
He's arrived.
So here's a coaching question for you, because you have a really lovely blog. You've got some posts on your site, and there's some really thoughtful stuff. And there was one there that was, I'm not going to say it right, but it was about the difference between a what and a why question, like what is 5 and why is 9, or something like that.
Right.
And your perspective on the use of what and why questions, I would say, is slightly different than some things I've learned in my own coaching education. So what I've generally learned is you try to avoid why questions, and you mostly focus on what and how questions, because why can come off as a little judgy. But you have a much more nuanced and interesting perspective on that. What is it, or why is it? Your take on the use of those kinds of questions.
Yeah. It's a serious throwback to that blog post. That's an oldie but goodie.
I like it though.
Seriously, that's probably like 8 years ago I wrote that thing.
Nice.
I read it not too long ago. I was like, yep, I still agree to that. That makes sense. Why tends to get to the epicenter of an issue. The what and the how tends to be more mechanical and logistical. And that's absolutely a valid question to ask,
right?
In most contexts. The why is a question that I can say, that guy's been showing up late 3 times this week. That's the what, right? But if I really want to get to the core of what's going on with that person, I got to be curious about why.
Yeah.
There's something underneath all of that that's causing them to show up late consistently.
Yeah.
And again, framed in a safe enough environment, from a person who is actually curious about the answer to the why question. It's not a challenge. I've already got my answer and I've already got your answer. So I'm asking this to prove a point. That's passive aggressive, and that's horrible communication.
Yeah.
But truly be inquisitive. I'm really curious. What's that about? Why do you think that's happening? And maybe it needs some context to explain, and the reason I'm asking that is I don't want this to continue. I want success for you here. And if I can help you solve as to why that's happening, I'm here for you. And so why just gets a little bit deeper. And again, it's got to be used judiciously if it's, and coming from the right place.
Yeah.
If it's not, you're right. It's confronting, it's challenging, it's threatening. And a lot of people aren't ready to go there.
Yeah.
In a conversation, in a coaching client relationship, that's what they signed up for. You're going to get a lot of why questions from Coach Dan. But an employee, they might not, that might not be the right question to ask in all situations by any stretch.
Yeah, it's delicate for sure, right? And the safety around that question, I think, is important. Speaking of questions, I always like to ask the previous guest to ask a question for you, and then I'll have one to you for you to ask the next guest. So our previous guest was a woman, Sonia Shelton, who's an executive coach and consultant, and she noticed, I think, your bit on your site that talks about kind of your business serving your life. And her question was, how do you align your business and personal purpose so they're working together and supporting each other?
God, what a great question. Thanks, Sonia. We dig into that stuff early on in a coaching relationship, about why did you start this business? Why are you in this role? Why do you want to continue to be in this role? Why do you want to change? Just again, a lot of those why questions, because that cuts to the quick on somebody's purpose, like bigger purpose, not just, well, I got to make money for my family, right? And it's the Six Sigma thing of the 5 whys question, right? I ask why 5 times, you'll really get kind of the root cause of something. Well, because I want to feed my family, right? Well, I get that, but like, why this job? Well, because it allows me to also get to my son's baseball practices and whatever.
Mm.
And if what you're doing serves your bigger purpose in life,
Yeah.
dude, you're an unqualified success.
Mm.
And sometimes the business we own, the job we do, the thing that is our bread and butter that puts food on the table might not be our life's ambition.
Mm-hmm.
It might not be, I've always dreamt of being a widget maker. That
Mm-hmm.
might not be the thing, but if it's serving your life to go in and make widgets for 40 hours a week,
Yeah.
union job, whatever. If your bigger purpose is to be a good parent or to be a good partner or to be a
Yeah.
good citizen or whatever that bigger purpose that you need to have some kind of a bead on,
Yeah.
then like I said, I think there's alignment there, and that's worth looking into.
I like that framing. Yeah. It's like, and so much of that is just how your mind connects those dots and allows you to see the connection of what you're doing and how it is ultimately serving your life.
Yeah. Well put.
Or not, and then making adjustments accordingly.
Or not. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then trim the sails, figure it out.
Yeah. So our next guest is Julie Junglewala, and she is a leadership coach, an author, a speaker, a really fascinating woman. Do you have a question for her?
I do. I hope it's relevant and poignant enough. I looked a little bit into her, and she specializes in impacting specifically in like higher education, in particular within leadership.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like just me, myself, I'm curious about, given the investment of resources, time, money, energy, et cetera, that are required to impact leadership and communication of an organization. Does she see any trends or themes, a pattern in those institutions who are actually willing to commit those resources to developing leadership and communication? Like, I wonder if there's a common thread amongst those institutions who are willing to invest that.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of marginalized in a lot of companies, certainly in higher education. They've got hierarchies and bureaucracies that they have to usually contend with. I'm curious, like, what do you think about those patterns? Who does and who doesn't?
Well, now I'm curious, so I'm looking forward to her answer. So yeah, thanks for that, Dan. As we try to wrap up, there's a couple questions I always like to ask folks. One, I can give you a magic wand and you could wave it and create a fully desuckified work world. What does that look like?
I would put that wand on eBay because that's worth a lot.
Yes, it is.
No, I'd probably wave it a couple times first, but
yeah,
that would be valuable, wouldn't it? That'd be awesome.
Yes, it would.
I would, TJ, I think everybody comes to the table with their issues. We all do, right?
Of course.
I would gift everyone a deep, intrinsic understanding that we're all human, right? Including our own selves, and grant us all the grace that we deserve, the appetite to grow, improve, develop in ways that create ripple effects to the lives and people and world around you. And it all starts with yourself.
Yeah.
And just, if I could wave that wand and give everybody that awareness that they are, they themselves are integral to getting that ball rolling.
It's amazing how blind to that simple reality we can be, that we are human and all that comes with it. And then how we often project our inability to see it in ourselves on those around us.
Yeah.
And all the work issues that we see are often rooted in that very fundamental truth, I think.
Yeah. Have you ever shared your magic wand? what you would offer?
I have not.
You can reserve. I don't want to.
Yeah, no. I have some thoughts. I really like your thought there. But I think in general, if we could just simply acknowledge that the work part of our day is actually part of our day. Yeah. I think we create this otherness to work, as if it's like I lead a work life and then there's my life. And as you mentioned, most of your days, certainly during the week, that's most of what you're doing. So that's your life. So I think if we can acknowledge that it's a part of our life and then figure out how we want to deal with that information, whatever that looks like, that would be a big step, I think.
Yeah. I agree.
Well, speaking of big, important things.
I'm not sure I understand.
Sorry. My Siri was just listening to me for some reason.
Nosy. I know.
She is nosy. Speaking of big, important things, I like to do sound effects on the show. And as you may have heard, they're a little silly. I do cat sounds and other things. And every guest pretty much has created their own sound to bring into this. And it usually shows up somewhere in the show in the beginning, usually. So do you have a desuckified sound effect for us?
I'm willing to share one. I think if I didn't know better, I'd say your objective was to for my kids to be mortified of their
that's
old
a
man.
bonus.
It's a bonus.
Yeah.
The topics that we've talked about today that I tend to talk about, we can take ourselves too seriously. And I have to put myself in check very often because we can over-index for how important some of the stuff is. We under-index for sure. So it would probably be kind of a cartoon laugh. And I know your affinity for cats, so you can feel free to ascribe this to a cartoon cat, but it's just a laugh. That would be.
I love that. I'm thinking, who is that character? Because it sounds like Simpson-esque to me.
Somewhere Simpson-y, somewhere maybe Goofy's laugh.
Goofy,
but there's something,
maybe.
I like to throw that out there. And
I love that.
To not take
I am looking forward to getting that into the show and maybe putting a little echo on it so it has a little more presence even. Maybe doing a repeat loop on it or something for extra embarrassment for your kids.
Perfect.
Last question I like to ask, obviously, is Dan, how can people find and follow you and connect to all the wonderful work you're doing out there?
I appreciate it, TJ. Go to bestself.coach. Normal spelling, all those words, bestself.coach. That'll direct you to the other places, the social media feeds or LinkedIn page or any of that. Tune into the Clearing Obstacles podcast. You can search for that on whichever your favorite listening platform is. Clearing Obstacles, again, regular spelling. And that's the best way to get in touch and find out a little bit more.
Awesome. Well, Dan, I hope they do, because I think you're putting out a ton of great energy and just a lot of great insight into the world. Thanks, and I am grateful to know you.
Likewise, I am you as well, and I really appreciate the opportunity. Your podcast is outstanding. You just have a very impressive lineup of guests that I always enjoy. So
awesome.
Good talk.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, TJ.
We'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to the DesuckifyWork Podcast. And a huge thanks to Dan for bringing curiosity and vulnerability to the show. If you enjoyed the episode, please like, share, rate, review, subscribe, or consider buying a DesuckifyWork t-shirt and wearing it to the gym every day, pumping up our logo bigger and bigger as you get more and more swole. You can follow Dan on LinkedIn and check out his site at bestself.coach. You should also check out his podcast, Clearing Obstacles. I was fortunate enough to be a guest a while back, and Dan is one of the best interviewers I've met. Every one of his episodes goes deep to the juiciest stuff. I've got some pretty juicy stuff on my site and my Substack newsletter as well. I'm on a mission to make work suck less, and I'd love for you to join me. Want to make that desuckification happen ASAP? Let's set up a free half-hour coaching session. Bye, everyone.